A Whole New World. The Birth of an Army. A trio of silhouettes tiptoed across the top of the palace walls. The night was so dark they could only be seen by where the stars did not shine. Noises were beginning in different towers and offices of the capital. Orders were being given, a chase was mounting, explanations were being offered, heads were literally beginning to roll. Aladdin, Jasmine, and Abu made it to a section that came close to some high-growing palm trees, where, somewhat ironically, Jasmine had made her escape not that long ago. It would have been impossible to make the leap with the tiger, and a lot easier with the magic carpet. It wasn't right leaving them behind. The party felt light and lonesome. Aladdin lay flat on the top of the wall and lowered Jasmine down as far as he could reach. She had to fall the last 10 feet into the prickly tree tops. Her landing, while not perfect, was good enough, and the part of her hair that got caught in the sharp fronds would grow back. Aladdin leapt down right after, his wound burning as the skin stretched, blood trickling down his side. They scuttled down the tree like lizards. When they hit the ground, they ran as fast and as lightly as their feet could take them to the quarter of the street rats. They hadn't gotten far when a strange sound grew out of the dark like the ticking of an enormous centipede, one with large, pointy shoes. Jasmine paused, a finger to her lips, when Aladdin looked at her questioningly. "We have to hide," she whispered. Aladdin looked around and found what seemed to be an abandoned house. Seemed, because all of Agrabah, apart from the palace, seemed abandoned that night. Every house was black, either with shutters and screens tightly closed, or only a few lamps lit. Even in the wealthy quarters, the tree houses and bars and wine gardens were empty. The silence that Aladdin had first encountered when returning from the cave in the desert was somehow deepened by the eerie, regular tapping. Stepping through the door that hung brokenly on its hinges, they saw little furniture inside. What remained was broken and trashed. Dust in the endless desert sand covered everything. The place was obviously empty. Jasmine sank wearily into the rotten old pillow that was probably full of bugs. But it didn't look like she cared. Aladdin stayed close by the door so he could watch through the crack. Passing by only a few feet when the door was a phalanx of 6 guards. Aladdin couldn't figure out what else to call them. Their uniforms were shiny and black like those of the sistrum shakers in the parade. Their movements were perfect and synchronous. They held unusual shiny metal weapons that were long, but only had blades at the tip. They wore boots, like horse riders did, with metal worked into the leather at the heels. But it was their faces and their eyes that made Aladdin wonder. They all looked the same, like the pretty girl dancers in the parade. Again, more than just like cousins or brothers. They were a perfect similarity to their expressions, from their strangely blank black eyes to their straight-as-a-line mouths, like statues or puppets or... Aladdin shuddered without knowing why. "What are they?" he swore after they passed by. "Jafar's new peacekeeping patrols," Jasmine said with a weary sigh. "They are... well, I don't know what exactly they are. They just kind of keep showing up. More magic, somehow." As she spoke, she took her hair out of its clasps and thongs and began to run her fingers through it. Dusty and ragged though it was, Aladdin still would have very much liked to do it for her, to brush it back from behind her ears. The patrols are only part of Jafar's big plans for Agrabah. They march through the city rounds all night to keep crime down, so he says. Some people like it, I guess. They feel safer, so he says. They seem a little weird. Jasmine's face was pale and listless. They had escaped and should have been revealed in reveling in triumph, but she didn't seem that excited. Actually, now that he thought about it, Aladdin didn't feel that excited either. He was relieved, of course, but he felt terrible about the magic carpet, and he had seen other things in the past week that were much harder, much heavier, than anything he had ever had to deal with before. "I'm sorry about your father," he said softly, sitting down next to her. Jasmine's face hardened. There was a light in her eyes now, but it was angry and ominous. She stretched her fingers out and back like a tiger, unshielding its claws. "Jafar killed him, right in front of me. I had no idea he hated my father so much. He could have done anything else to him. With all of his power, he could have banished him or turned him into a mouse or anything. Instead, he just pushed him over the railing, just like that. I think Jafar has been nursing some very high ambitions and some very angry thoughts for a long time," Aladdin said gently. This was all extremely planned. Arresting me for being with you was just part of it. He needed me to get the lamp with the genie in it. Jasmine blinked. You got the lamp for Jafar? Yeah, it's a long story. Funny, I've been saying that a lot recently. Someday maybe I'll tell you the whole thing. Suffice it to say that I never want to go inside another cave again. Jasmine frowned. So, it wasn't my fault? He would have found someone else to do his dirty work anyway? I have no idea. It's something I've wondered about, but it is your fault for not thinking of the consequences when you went out and about in Agrabah in disguise, Aladdin said gently. I just thought you were a pretty rich girl slumming it, Your Royal Highness. You think I'm pretty? She asked, eyes wide. Aladdin paused with his mouth hanging open, unsure what to say. Ha, I'm kidding, of course you do, Jasmine said, cracking a very unprincessy smile. She pushed him on his shoulder, and for a moment Aladdin was reminded, not unfavorably, of Morgiana. You're as easy to read as a book in Aramaic. You need to tell me the truth about one thing, though, she added, suddenly serious. Anything, he promised. What is your name? Aladdin laughed. I guess we never formally introduced ourselves, did we? He leapt up and gave a deep bow. I am Aladdin, son of Hetifa, who was the daughter of Tueka, who was the son of Ibrahim, who was the daughter of a whole lot of people you've never heard of. No one's ever heard of. And I am... Well, you already know who I am, Jasmine said, growing gloomy again. I'm really, really sorry for everything you've been through. It's been worth it. Mostly, Aladdin said, sitting back down on the ground next to her. He winced at the pain in his side. Jasmine saw it and sucked in her breath, but when she reached up to touch it, he lightly pushed her hands away. Besides, I lived through it to fight another day. We'll get Jafar, and we'll get you back on your throne. Somehow. In memory of your father. In revenge of my father, Jasmine hissed through her teeth. She clenched her fists again and stared into the distance with burning anger. Aladdin rubbed his hands over his face. Too much had happened too quickly. Everything was changing too fast. The old sultan was gone. Not a great man as sultans went, but at least he was consistent. Jafar, the creepy vizier, was now a creepy and insane dictator. Agrabah was different. Everything felt uneasy, and Rasul was gone. Aladdin didn't quite especially have deep feelings for the man, especially since he had gifted Aladdin with a wound to his side, but, like the old sultan, he had been a constant in Aladdin's life. A personal one. Rasul had been chasing him since he was a boy. Now Aladdin was a young man, and Rasul was captain of the guard. It was almost like they had grown up together, on different paths. A strange ache formed in Aladdin's stomach. He had never wished the man dead. He had never been responsible for anyone's death before. That was different, too. His guilt was new, and everything new seemed terrible. Except for Jasmine. Just looking at her made him feel better about everything. Her hair was now in a braid wrapped around her head like a nomad's girl, tendrils coming down around her ears in a ridiculously charming way. Her face, streaked with dust, still glowed. In another time or place, he would have reached over to kiss her. But she was different, too. She was seething. He realized he was watching the happy and generous, albeit naive, girl turn into something dark and terrible. He had to stop it. We have to stop him, she said, her voice cracking, strangely echoing his own thoughts. All right, we will, he said softly, putting his arm around her. But I don't think we can stop him on our own. Let's go somewhere safe. Morgiana's. We can figure stuff out from there. He stood up and gave her his hand. She took it, struggling with an exhaustion that threatened to pull her back down. He checked outside, but the danger seemed to have passed. He could hear Agrabah reawakening behind the patrol, like scrub grass full of timid insects that start chirping once mounted raiders have gone on their way. They had slipped only about 4 houses up the street when Jasmine suddenly asked, Wait, who's Morgiana? Aladdin sighed. A friend, he decided. A friend, Jasmine said skeptically. We've known each other since childhood. We grew up together, and then we sort of went down different roads. What, she became a scholar? Jasmine teased, but she seemed relieved. A mother? A priestess? No, worse. A thief. Much worse than me. She and Dubon organized their own little crime ring. They started out training the small, uncared-for street rats to be better beggars. Remember the ones I showed you? Yeah, those. And then they got trained to be thieves, and sometimes other not nice things. I didn't agree with their philosophy of life. Between that and what's going on with my family, we went our separate ways. A fortnight ago, I didn't understand markets, thievery, or poverty. Today I'm learning there are different levels of thievery, Jasmine said, shaking her head. Yeah, try getting stuck inside the belly of a stone tiger, Aladdin suggested. That will really open up a whole new world for you. Jasmine was delighted by their entry into Morgiana's hideout, but not by the beggars that were suddenly pointed at her and Aladdin's sides as soon as they arrived in the main room.